What's up, Common Ground? My name is Mike VanMeter. I'm one of the pastors here at Foothills, if we haven't met, and I have the honor of being able to kind of bring the word this week for Common Ground. Before I get into it, I want to say a couple things. First is that you guys had a contest that if you dressed dapper for Easter and you tagged Common Ground's Instagram page, there was a contest to see who won, and this might seem like the fix is in because she's my very good friend and my assistant, but Matt and Taylor Foreman were the winners. I did not pick them. It was not on me, so that's on David. So congratulations, everybody who did that, and especially Matt and Taylor. What did they win? $25 gift card, and you get to pick where it's from. That's pretty epic. So that would be really important for Taylor because I don't pay her very much, so sorry about that. I kind of want to just talk about something that's been on my heart for the past, I don't know, kind of since this thing has been going on. Obviously, the coronavirus has been kind of a weird thing. There's lots of things that have been challenging and interesting and different developments and things that have been kind of hard or variously hard for some people. And I know lots of people, probably a fair amount of you who are watching, there's been something kind of cool about it, like being able to just stay home in your PJs all day long. I think for a lot of older people, it's kind of hard for them to understand that, but we have gotten really, really good at being at our houses, okay? So when I was a kid, you wanted to be anywhere other than in your house, okay? So you want to be like out running the streets. And that's because back when I was, I don't want to get all like when I was a kid on you guys, but when I was a kid, we had these things. You want to play video games, like any kind of actual decent video game, you had to go to what was called an arcade. It was these things that would be at the mall or in a strip mall somewhere, and they had these awesome stand-up video games, and it was one, and you would look, for me, it was at 7-Eleven, okay? We would go to 7-Eleven, and there was a Street Fighter 2 there, and you'd have a line of like 10 kids. You go put your quarter on the machine. It cost $0.25 every game. It was a ripoff, and we spent way more money on video games than people do today. And you would put your quarter up there, and you go and play. And I sucked at Street Fighter 2, and so it was like always like one and done for me. I'd go get Aryukened, and then I'd go to the back of the line, and it was a bummer. So that was back when, and let's say it was like a rainy day and you were stuck inside, like your options were to watch TV, okay? And TV back then had this thing called commercials. Like every 7 minutes, you would have a 2-minute commercial in the middle of your television show. And if you really wanted to watch a show, you had to like find out what time it was on and then make sure you were there in front of your TV with your TV turned on at that time, because this is like no such thing as on-demand, TiVo, any of that kind of stuff. And they always had these cliffhangers at the end of the episode, like you had to wait till next week. It was like life back then was really torturous and terrible and horrible. Walk to school in the snow, uphill both ways. All right, so, but we have gotten really good at just being at home, right? So we are really good. We have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have any number of services like Disney Plus, HBO is free right now. Like, there's all kinds of different things that we can make being at home really easy and really convenient and really comfortable. And so for some of us, especially young people, maybe, like you kind of are doing school online, maybe you had kind of a part-time job, maybe you're still doing it, maybe you're not, but maybe you're not that affected, and maybe the effect hasn't been that bad. There's other people, though, that have been just like devastated. It's been a really difficult, challenging thing. I think for everybody, there's some things that have been challenging, but some people have gotten sick. Obviously, people who are older and people with certain conditions have experienced much worse health outcomes, and I think that can be really scary. I think there's a lot of people who are considering their own mortality, the possibility of dying, and these things in ways that maybe we don't normally think about that much. Beyond just the health implications of getting sick, there's been the economic implications, right? So most of you guys this week just got a check for $1,200, right? You're probably thinking awesome right now, but I just want to give you, encourage you, what you need to do with that $1,200 is put it in, not a savings account because you'll never make any money, the interest rate's so low, but you need to invest that money because you're going to have to pay that money back someday, right? That money, the government doesn't have any money. The only money they have is the money that we give them and the money they print. And so what happened is they just printed a bunch of money, and we're going to have to pay it back years from now. And so the economic impact of a $3 trillion stimulus, and it's going to be much bigger than that, is incredibly detrimental to the economy in the long run. So that's just the big picture, but there's lots of people whose businesses are shut down, whose jobs are shut down, who aren't sure what's going to happen in the future because of just the shutdown that we've had. And so that can be incredibly dangerous and scary and fearful to people's futures, just kind of what they had planned and expected to evaporate like that overnight. There's other things going on though too, and I've seen, over the past few weeks, you guys have had people come in here and kind of explain, what are some of the political aspects of this? And I think the political question is going to increasingly become a bigger and bigger question of, man, what is the government's responsibility in this, and what is our responsibility to the government? And there's something called like government creep, right? There's the people who want the government to be in charge increasingly of your lives, that's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And people who want to do that, this is a great opportunity for the government to take more control. And so you're going to see a lot of that happening. You're going to see the government restricting people and taking authority over people where maybe they shouldn't have it. And there's going to be people who are definitely going to overstep. There's real religious implications. There's a lot of us, man, this church is really the kind of the center of our community, of our people. And not being able to get together has been a real challenge and really difficult. Like, we just celebrated Easter this last Sunday, and it was the first time in my memory that the majority of Christians couldn't be together in worshiping together as God's people on Easter Sunday. That's rough, and it's been that way for a month, and it's probably going to be that way for some time in the future. And so that's been a real challenge, right? And then I think there's also been like, man, what is happening? Like, things keep changing every day. The news keeps changing every day. There's lots of people who are saying, this is a big deal. This is going to be really dangerous and kill a lot of people. Early estimates said, man, this could kill up to like 2 million people in the United States of America, which would be catastrophic, right? And there's other people who are saying, this is not that big of a deal. Like, this is like on par with the flu, or maybe just a really bad flu season. And there's been people who have, conjectured all kinds of reasons of where is this coming from and why is this happening? And there's been lots of conspiracy theories. And it's hard to know, depending upon which news should I read? And where, there's people who are like, this is going to be horrible. And there's people like, this is the government conspiracy. And there's all these things, and it's hard to know what's going on. And I think that puts people in a position of just feeling uneasy and unsure about life. And so there's, obviously, if you're a Christian, you've been thinking about these issues at all, there's so many different things to think about in relationship to the Bible, and how do we relate to this? Should we as Christians think about these kinds of things? And things are just really challenging. So I just want to kind of like go down one little idea that I've been thinking of that I think relates to this whole thing. And it goes back to this idea of the wilderness, right? This biblical concept of the wilderness that is really prevalent. So, we have two kind of primary uses of the wilderness in the Bible. The first one is the one I want to talk about today, which is, real quick Bible history. Israel ended up, remember Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? Okay, so he goes into he gets sold into slavery into Egypt, goes to prison, ends up getting delivered out of prison, and he's living there because he interprets Pharaoh's dream, and he delivers the people from this huge famine that happened. And so because of that, his father, Jacob, and all their sons move to Egypt. They move out of the promised land that God had shown to Abraham, and they move into Egypt, right? And they stay there for about 400 plus years, and they end up becoming enslaved there, and they multiply, and they become a huge nation. It was just a tribe, basically, of a few hundred people, and by the time they leave, they're like 1 million people or something, right? So it's this huge tribe, and so this is where Prince of Egypt, right? They get delivered with Moses delivers them out of enslavement in Egypt, and they go into the wilderness, and they're on the cusp of the promised land where they're going to, that God has promised to his people. And they send these spies, and these 12 spies, and 10 of them we don't know, but the other 2 are Caleb and Joshua. And they go in, and they end up saying, man, this is a really scary place. Caleb and Joshua want to say, look, God is going to deliver us. He just did all these amazing things for us. He's going to give us this land. And everybody else goes with the other 10 who are saying, these people will destroy us. And so God judges them. And he says, you're going to wander for 40 years in the wilderness until this generation dies off. And then the next generation is the one who are going to take over, and Caleb and Joshua are going to lead God's people into the promised land. So that's the wilderness I want to talk about today, and it plays a really central role in the Old Testament and the story of Israel. The second illustration of the wilderness is when Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days after his baptism and his fast, and then he's tempted by Satan, right? And so the wilderness kind of plays this metaphorical role in the people of God. And one of the things, the metaphors is judgment, right? It really was a judgment, God's judgment on his people, that they will wander and die off in the wilderness without ever really go into the inheritance that God had given them. But what's interesting is when you read the Bible, that's not the only thing it is. In fact, God views the wilderness as something really special, as something really good. And so I just want to look real quick at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 31 through 33. It says, "In the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as a man carries his son, in all the way which you have walked until you came to this place." So God is saying, is a vision of the wilderness being this place where God was carrying them like a father carries his son, right? And it kind of has to illustrate this idea of, now we go places, I love seeing pictures of me carrying my kids, right? Because kids are little, they don't want to walk. They're the lamest. And in the moment, it's usually a total pain. But it actually is this really kind of bonding moment when you are carrying your child someplace because they can't make it on their own, right? They would never be able to survive. And this is the picture of God's people would never be able to survive on their own in the wilderness, but it's this time where God is intimately carrying them like a father carries a son. You remember how in the Bible, or in the wilderness, they didn't have any food, and so God gave them manna every day to eat, this bread from heaven, right? He gave them quail at a different point of meat to eat. It's where where there was no water, and God supplied water out of rocks. There was stagnant water, and they threw a branch in, and the water became clean, able to drink. God delivered them all these miraculous ways where they were learning to walk with God, and God was carrying them. God was helping them. And then it says in the next verse, it says, "But for all of this, you did not trust the Lord your God who goes before you on your way, to seek out a place for you to encamp in fire by night and cloud by day, to show you the way in which you should go." So it's alluding to in the last part, it says that God would lead them by a pillar of fire by day and a cloud of smoke by night, and he would lead them through the wilderness. So it was this time of like really trusting God. They were trusting God for everything, for how they would live, how they would survive, where they would go. And God says here, you didn't learn that lesson, but you were intended to. It was a test. The wilderness, so one of the things the wilderness is, it's a test. It's a test of our spirits. It's a test of, man, are we going to walk by faith? Are we going to trust God or not? And it's also this place that if we learn it, we gain some intimacy with God. And so one of the other things that the wilderness is it's a school, right? So where do you take tests? You take tests at school. It's a place for you to learn something. And, as we're kind of coming into this season of where a lot has been stripped away, right? A lot of us are staying home all the time. A lot of us, our jobs, the busyness of life has been stripped away. Some of us not, but one of the things is this is a time where to test us. For God is challenging us, say, what's in your heart? Will you really learn to rely on me? Will you really learn to trust me? And so one of the things I've been thinking about in this whole process is, I'm kind of every day I'm faced with this decision. Am I going to lean into God and seek God out, or am I just going to like Tiger King binge watch for the rest of my life, right? Am I just going to find something to busy myself, some video game to pour hours into, am I just going to scroll through social media or whatever, or am I going to actually take the opportunity to learn something? When I was in school, I was always just historically a terrible student, okay? So I graduated high school with a 1.87 GPA. Cumulative GPA, my entire high school was less than a C, like D+, okay? I do not know. I do have a diploma. I don't know how it happened, okay? So, and it's not because I was dumb, right? In fact, there's lots of dumb people who do really good at school. It's because I was a terrible student. I just would not focus. I didn't care. I remember sitting in class, daydreaming about a million different things other than what I was supposed to be learning. I was really undisciplined. And I missed it, And so I actually have a degree, so I had to go back to college. And I actually had to learn as an adult how to do some basic things that I should have learned to do when I was in high school. like discipline myself, do my homework, turn in my assignments, that kind of stuff. And so I had to learn really what it was to trust God. And so I had both experiences of going to school and it being a big waste of my time, and going to school and becoming a student and learning and growing. This is an opportunity right now. I'm just telling you, the wilderness of this coronavirus situation is an opportunity for us to learn some really important things about who we are and who God is. And I want to encourage you to study those things. So let's flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 8. I want to encourage you to read this whole chapter on your own. This is really good stuff, but I just want to dial in on just a couple verses here. The first thing is this, we'll read it again. You shall remember all the ways in which the Lord has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what is in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and let you be hungry and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. Okay, so these things are a little bit related. So the wilderness is a place of judgment. The wilderness is also, though, a school, right, for us to learn. But even more than that, the wilderness is an opportunity to grow closer. So I've been married for, it's going to be 9 years coming up in May next month. And when I was dating my wife, Hannah, early on in our relationship, we went to a wedding, and we were we left the wedding and we're driving the backcountry out. There's a road that goes from like Dehesa out to like Julian, and we're driving out there, and we got to this field where there's just these two big oak trees. It's like nothing else. It's a big open field, and there's these two big oak trees. And when I was driving there, I knew when I saw that place, I thought, I'm going to marry this woman, and this is where I'm going to propose. Okay, so. Fast forward several months, and it was time for me to ask her to be engaged, and this whole day ended up being a disaster. Like, had to be this one day. I was gonna ask her to marry me, and it was like pouring rain, and I was like, let's just go for a drive. It'll be fun, you know. And she's like, we're at the point in our relationship where she's like, she knows what's up, right? And so we're like driving in this dirt road. It's like desolate wilderness, nothing there, and it's pouring down rain. And we get to our trees, and she's like, let's get out. She's like doing me a solid because she knows what's going on, right? And so we get out, and it's pouring rain. We go there. We're kind of under the trees, and it kind of creates this covering. I get down on a knee, and I just say, will you be my wife? And she says yes. And I read her this letter that I had for her, and we go get back in the car, and we're just talking about, you know, all these things that we kind of were trying not to talk about, like our life and our wedding and our kids and, you know, what do we want to do for our family and all that kind of stuff. We talked for like a couple hours. Then I go to turn on the car, and it just won't turn on. Like, the battery is dead because we've been sitting in the car with the light on for these. And listen, there is no one coming, okay? This is like, you can't hike out of this place. It is crazy, the middle of nowhere. And so we're on a hill like this, backwards, and it's a manual transmission. So anyways, long story short, I have one chance, right, to like pop start this thing. It starts, we survive, we've been married, we have 5 kids, so everything worked out good. But at least once a year, we go out to these trees, and we have a little thing we've buried there, and we have things of our family. So every time we have a new kid, we go and we write about this little letter, and we put it in there, and it's like this special place for my family. My wife actually, we have this painting that my wife has painted of us, me and her, and all of our kids, and at these trees. And it's just this like place where it's this kind of romantic place. And I don't know if anybody else would see it if they think twice about it. But for us, it's this place that is like intimate and special and good for our family, because it's this place where we have history, where we've connected. Look, the wilderness was like that for God. God and his people, Israel, he saw this as a time where, man, let's take away all the distractions. Let's take away everything else, and let's just focus on us, on our relationship, on what the most important thing is. And so he really cherishes, there's all these allusions in the Bible to these times when God looks back and he just like almost wistfully, like almost the memories of this time when it was just so simple, when he could just commune with his people on a regular basis, because there wasn't everything else to be done. There wasn't all the work to be done. There wasn't all the cities to build. There wasn't all the other things to do. It was just this intimate time between God's people and him. And, there's an opportunity right now for us in this to have grow that kind of relationship with God. Most of us don't know that kind of intimacy with God. Most of us, we have some knowledge about God, we have some understanding about God, but if we're honest, I think it's really difficult for us to have that kind of intimate nearness with God. And he gives this warning at the end of chapter 8 in Deuteronomy. Well, it's not the end, but in verse 11 he says, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his ordinances and his statutes which I'm commanding you today. Otherwise, when you have eaten and are satisfied and have built good houses and lived in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply and your silver and gold multiply, and all that you have multiplies, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And this is a really important lesson for us because remember, the people were on the verge of the promised land. The promised land was good. It was something that God wanted to give them. God had promised it. He promised to Abraham. It was this land, this exceedingly good land, this land flowing with milk and honey it was God's delight to give it to him. But he said, listen, there's a danger in it for you. I don't want you to forget this wilderness. Because when you go there and you experience all the good things that this land has to offer, and you have these beautiful cities and these beautiful houses, and your gold multiplies and your silver multiplies, don't start thinking it was me who did this. Because you can have that kind of intimacy with God in the city, in the promised land. But it's a lot harder to have it, okay? And look, we match up this really well. We live in the United States of America. It's one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. Most of us, like I said earlier, we have really comfortable lives, really easy lives, really enjoyable lives. But most of us have started to think about those things as that's the point. That's what we're after. We're after the good job so we can live a blessed life, so we can just have great, just an enjoyable, comfortable life. A lot of times when we tell our kids, you want to grow up and have a good job, you want to go to college and get a good job so you can have a comfortable life, and God's saying, that's not it, man. And it's about me. God's value, his worth so far exceeds all those other things. He says, just draw close to me and be with me. And you can do that in the promised land, but it's hard to do with all the distractions because as we kind of have these nice lives and comfortable lives. And so sometimes God makes it difficult for us. He brings us back into the wilderness so that we can grow closer to him. We can rekindle that relationship. It says in the book of Hosea, and I'll just end with this, in Hosea chapter 2, verse 14. Remember, the book of Hosea is this prophetic picture. God has his prophet Hosea go and marry this woman Gomer. This woman is a prostitute. She's unfaithful, and it's this picture of God being the righteous, faithful, like Hosea, and his people being this immoral prostitute who goes off and leaves her husband, leaves the faithfulness of her home to go and whore herself out with these other gods, and go away after all these other things. But he says that there's going to be a time when your judgment is going to be over. And look what it says. It says that there, behold, I will allure her. I will bring her into the wilderness and speak kindly to her. That God's desire is to woo his people, to allure his people back into the wilderness so that they can learn to trust him, they can learn to rely on him, they can learn to look to him again. And so look, this is just my heart for me and really for us as a church and our people, is that this would be a time of us growing closer to God in our intimacy, in our faithfulness, in trusting him, in obeying his commandments, in looking to him to satisfy our soul, to feed us. And as we do that, this time, no matter what happens, no matter how difficult it is, no matter what happens financially, no matter what happens relationally, no matter what happens to your work, no matter what happens to your school, your plans for the future, all of that is all a distant second place to this opportunity we have to draw near to the Lord. And so I just want to pray that I would do it and that you would do it. So let me pray for us right now. Father, I pray, God, that you would allure us back to you, Father. I pray, God, no matter what else this time is remembered for, Lord, God, it would be marked in our lives. Father, it's a time, Lord, of seeking you out, God, of pursuing you, of drawing near to you, God, and that you would be glorified and magnified in us, Lord, and that we would come out of this season, whenever we do, and whatever that looks like, we would come out of this season walking closer with you, God, walking more faithfully with you, God, and more obedient covenant with you, Jesus, and that, God, you would have your way in our hearts. Lord, we love you and bless you in Jesus' name. Common Ground, be blessed. I love you guys and praying for you.